can I borrow your mom for today? What?
Malik turned around so fast he nearly dropped his water bottle. Standing behind him, in a spotless navy pinafore with her hair pinned into two perfect buns, was a girl he had never once spoken to in the entire school year. What? She didn't blink. She pointed past him, straight at Denise, who was busy pinning a paper number onto Malik's shirt. I need to borrow her. Just for today. Malik frowned. That's my mom. I know. The girl's eyes drifted toward the parking lot, toward the gate, the way someone checks a door they're hoping will open. I'll give her back before the bell rings. Before Malik could ask why, the whistle screamed across the field, and the whole third grade scattered toward their families for the parent and child relay. Moms retied sneakers. Dads hoisted kids onto shoulders for a better view. Teachers waved clipboards and shouted for everyone to find their partner. The girl didn't move. She stood exactly where she was, small hands wrapped around the strap of a backpack that looked far too expensive for an elementary school field day, her gaze fixed on the front gate, like she was still waiting for it to open for someone specific. Denise had heard every word of it. She'd come to Rosewood Elementary's field day with sunscreen, a cooler of juice boxes, and the particular kind of joy a single mother carries when an ordinary Tuesday afternoon has been carved out just for her son. She had not expected a stranger's daughter to ask, with complete seriousness, if she could rent her for the day. Malik tugged her sleeve. Mom. Denise looked from her son to the girl. The child's uniform was pressed, her shoes gleamed, not a hair out of place. Nothing about her looked unloved, and yet something in the way she kept glancing at that gate made Denise's chest pull tight anyway. Parents and kids, line up for the three-legged race, the teacher called again. Malik leaned into his mother and whispered, Can she borrow you? Just for the race? The girl looked down fast, like she hadn't expected anyone to actually consider it. Denise crouched down to her eye level. What's your name, sweetheart? Yuna, the girl answered, without hesitation. Yuna, Denise said gently. Is your mom or dad running late? For half a second, something flickered across the girl's face. Not quite hurt, just a small tightening at the corners of her mouth. Then, quietly, my dad promised he'd be here. Denise didn't push further. She simply held out her hand. Well, until he gets here, you can run with us. Yuna stared at the hand, then at Malik. Malik gave a single, very solemn nod, the kind reserved for closing important negotiations. Borrowing approved. Yuna blinked, caught off guard, and something close to a laugh nearly escaped before she stopped it. They tied the ribbon around Malik's ankle and Yuna's, Denise steadying them both from behind. The whistle blew. Which foot goes first? Yuna whispered. Your left or my left? Malik whispered back. There's only one left. There's two lefts, obviously. They both went down on the second step. Denise caught them before they hit the grass, laughing so hard she nearly dropped the ribbon herself. Yuna looked stunned by the sound, like she wasn't used to adults laughing that easily. Then Malik yanked her forward. Come on, borrowed sister. I'm not your sister. Only until the bell rings. That time Yuna actually laughed. Quick, surprised. Gone almost before it started. But Denise caught it, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her throat tightened right along with it. If this story already has you hooked, go ahead and tap that subscribe button now. There's a lot more heart waiting in this one. They didn't win the race. Malik blamed the ribbon. Yuna blamed insufficient coordination protocols, which made Denise laugh even harder. For a few golden minutes, Yuna forgot to look at the gate at all. Then the race ended. Parents cheered, kids ran into open arms, and Malik dragged Yuna toward the picnic blanket where Denise had laid out lunch. Now you have to eat with us. Yuna froze. That's okay. I'll wait for my dad. Denise unzipped the cooler. You don't like turkey sandwiches? I didn't say that. She looked at the sandwiches, then at Malik, then back at Denise. Your food is for your family. Denise set a plate down anyway. Sandwich, orange slices, a juice box. Placed it beside Malik's plate like it had always belonged there. There's plenty. Sit. Yuna sat, slowly, and picked up the sandwich with both hands, but didn't eat. She just stared at it. Denise noticed. Everything okay? Yuna shook her head fast. I'm fine. Then why aren't you eating? Her small fingers tightened around the bread. When she finally spoke, her voice had dropped to almost nothing. Nobody's ever packed me a lunch before. Malik stopped mid-bite. Denise went completely still. The field around them stayed loud. Whistles, laughter, a teacher calling names off a clipboard, but at that picnic blanket, the whole world seemed to lower its volume. Yuna seemed to realize she'd said more than she meant to, and quickly took a bite. "It's really good," she said. "Too fast, too polite." Denise looked away just long enough to compose her face. Malik slid his own juice box across the blanket. "You can have mine too. I already have one." "I know. Take it anyway." Yuna frowned. "Why?" Malik shrugged like it was obvious. "Borrowed people get extra." That did it. A real, unguarded smile broke across Yuna's face. And that's exactly the moment a black luxury sedan turned sharply into the school parking lot, tires crunching too loud against the quiet afternoon. Several parents looked up. The car didn't belong next to minivans and school buses. Too dark, too polished, too silent. Yuna heard the engine before she saw it. Her smile vanished instantly. Denise noticed that too. The sedan stopped near the gate, and a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, phone still in one hand, scanning the field with barely restrained urgency. The moment his eyes found Yuna, something in his shoulders dropped in relief, and he started walking fast. Most kids would have sprinted toward a parent who'd finally shown up. Yuna didn't move from the blanket. She stayed seated, sandwich still in her hands, and simply watched her father approach. Denise looked between the man and the little girl, and the question that had started with one strange sentence on the field suddenly felt much bigger. Why wouldn't a child who'd waited all afternoon run to her father the moment he finally arrived? For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Yuna Choi saw only one thing: his daughter, safe, still holding a sandwich someone else had made for her. Relief hit him first. Guilt landed right behind it. He crossed the field and dropped to one knee in front of her. "I'm sorry." No excuse about the board meeting. No mention of the merger call that had run 40 minutes over. Just those two words. Yuna studied him quietly, then gave one small nod. The nod of a child who had been disappointed enough times to know her father never broke a promise on purpose, which somehow made it worse, not better. A kid should never have to learn to expect that. Before they left, Yuna turned and bowed politely to Denise and Malik. "Thank you for letting me borrow your family." Denise smiled. "And thank you for bringing our borrowed daughter back before the bell." Something shifted in the air between the two families. Yuna almost smiled again. Almost. Jaewon introduced himself quietly, apologized for interrupting their afternoon, thanked Denise for looking after his daughter. Denise studied him for a moment. This wasn't the cold, untouchable executive she'd half expected from the car. This was just a father who'd shown up too late, again. As they turned to go, Denise said something she hadn't planned to say. Kids don't remember the expensive days. They remember the happy ones. Jaewon didn't answer, but he didn't forget it either. The sedan pulled away from the school, and the silence inside returned immediately. Yuna sat by the window, still clutching the extra juice box Malik had insisted she keep. Neither of them said much on the drive. Jaewon kept his eyes on the road, realizing, for the first time in longer than he wanted to admit, that he didn't actually know what to ask his own daughter. 20 minutes later, the gates of the Choi estate slid open. Manicured hedges, a marble fountain, a silence so complete it felt engineered. The front door opened before the car had even stopped. Mrs. Han and two nannies were already waiting, gentle smiles fixed in place, routines unchanged. One took her backpack. Another reminded her that violin practice started in 15 minutes. A third asked if she wanted warm milk before homework. Everything exactly on schedule, every single day. As Yuna started for the stairs, a soft voice called after her. "Young miss, please don't run." She slowed without turning around, already resigned. "Does everyone get slower after 60? She murmured. Not really to anyone, the way a child talks when they've stopped expecting a real answer. That evening, Jaewon sat in his study staring at contracts he wasn't reading. His assistant, Mr. Beck, set a new folder on the desk and noticed his employer looking out the window instead. "Sir," Jaewon looked up. "You've brought up the woman from the school 3 times tonight. I asked 1 question. You asked 3. Jaewon had no reply. He turned back to the window. "Did Yuna seem different to you today?" Mr. Beck answered without hesitation. "She laughed, sir." The room went quiet. After a long pause, Jaewon spoke without moving. "I haven't heard that in a while." Mr. Beck chose his next words carefully. "There are some things money can't hire." The study stayed silent after that. Jaewon already knew the rest of the story without being reminded. His ex-wife Soo-jin's affair hadn't been the deepest wound. What came after was worse. She'd paid someone inside the house to feed her every schedule, every conversation, every movement, for over a year while he traveled for work. When it came out, the marriage ended, custody went to him, and trust left with everyone else. Every young nanny was let go. Every replacement after that was older, careful, people he was certain couldn't be bought or turned. They loved Yuna faithfully, fed her, protected her, kept her impeccably safe. But somewhere in all that safety, the house had stopped being lived in. It was only maintained. The next morning followed its usual clockwork. Breakfast, homework check, violin, everything precisely where it belonged. Mrs. Han set the day's schedule beside Yuna's plate. Your father asked if there's anything special you'd like after school. Usually the answer came instantly. A new charm, a book, a stuffed animal. Today, Yuna was quiet. She looked up at her father. Dad, can I visit Malik? The dining room went still. Mrs. Han glanced at Jaeswan. The other staff paused mid-task. It wasn't an expensive request. It wasn't even a hard one. And yet somehow it caught everyone off guard. Jaewon studied his daughter for a long moment. He'd braced for another toy, another reward for good grades. Instead, his daughter wanted to spend an afternoon with a boy she'd known for less than a day. He nodded slowly. All right. A small smile broke across Yuna's face and disappeared almost as fast as it came. She lowered her head and went back to her breakfast. But something about her had already changed. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't looking forward to something that could be bought. Jaewon drove her to school himself that morning, the question from breakfast sitting quietly between them the whole way. At the gate, Denise was arriving with Malik. Malik spotted Yuna first. Borrowed sister. Yuna answered flatly, I'm still not your sister. We'll work on it. Denise greeted Jaewon with polite warmth. He returned it the same way. They'd only met the day before, but one race, one sandwich, and one unexpected promise had already made two strangers feel oddly familiar. Jaewon didn't waste words. Yuna asked if she could visit after school. Denise looked at Yuna, who stood quietly beside her father waiting. She smiled. Of course. Malik pumped his fist once. Borrowed sisters coming over. The bell rang, and the two kids hurried inside together. Yuna walking beside Malik, not behind him, a small thing Jaewon noticed and couldn't quite let go of for the rest of the day. That afternoon, Jaewon came back himself. No driver, no security detail, just his assistant, trailing a respectful distance behind. For a man who'd spent years building walls after being betrayed, dropping his only daughter into a stranger's home was not a small thing, so he drove her there personally. Denise's house looked nothing like the Choi estate. No gates, no fountain, just a small brick home with a wind chime on the porch, crayon drawings taped in the front window, and a row of tomato plants along the side yard. The moment the door opened, Yuna noticed two things. First, the noise. Music from a kitchen radio, a pot bubbling, Malik dropping his backpack in the hallway without a single person flinching. Second, the smell. Cinnamon and something frying. On the counter sat a plate of French toast, still steaming. Malik's eyes lit up. He glanced toward the hallway and lowered his voice. Pop made those. Yuna eyed the plate. Shouldn't we ask first? Malik looked at her like she'd said something baffling. If we ask, he'll say no. Before she could argue, he pressed a slice into her hands. She froze, staring at it. She looked toward Denise, busy pouring juice in the kitchen. She looked toward her father, standing quietly near the doorway, taking in the small, loud, warm house like it was a language he was only starting to understand. Yuna looked back down at the toast. Malik had already taken a bite. She took one small, careful bite. Her eyes went wide. Malik grinned. Told you. She nodded before she could stop herself. That's when heavy footsteps came down the hall. An older man appeared, carrying a bag of flour under one arm. Tall, broad through the shoulders, gray hair standing up in every direction, like he'd lost an argument with a mixing bowl. A faded apron dusted with flour covered him head to sleeve. He stopped, counted the slices on the plate, twice. His eyes moved from Malik to Yuna, to the half-eaten piece of toast sitting there like evidence. Silence. He raised one flour-covered finger. Who touched my French toast? Malik pointed at Yuna without a flicker of hesitation. The borrowed sister did it. Yuna's mouth fell open. You gave it to me. The old man gasped theatrically. So, we've got a thief and an accomplice. Malik shrieked with laughter and bolted. Yuna froze for exactly 1 second, then ran too. The old man chased them both through the backyard with alarming speed, spatula raised like a scepter, flour trailing behind him like smoke. Yuna glanced back over her shoulder, stunned. Old people can actually run. He finally stopped near the garden fence, hands on his knees, breathing hard, flour still dusted across one cheek. He looked at Yuna. You're fast, she answered honestly. I thought you were actually going to catch me. He straightened, offended. Catch you? I was protecting my knees. Malik collapsed onto the grass, laughing. You were losing. He folded his arms with great dignity. I was demonstrating mercy. At my age, I let children believe they're winning. He glanced back at the crime scene of a plate on the counter, then at both kids. The suspect will now step forward. Yuna slowly raised her hand. I ate the toast. He nodded, deeply impressed. I like this one. Confesses, before the trial even starts. He walked over and stuck out one floury hand toward Jaewon. Name's Otis. Don't call me Grandpa. It makes my knees hurt worse. Everyone calls me Pop. Before Jaewon could respond, Malik grinned. Okay, Grandpa Pop. Otis closed his eyes and sighed like a man who had given up that fight years ago. Denise appeared on the porch, wiping her hands. Sorry about him, he argues with everybody. Otis looked wounded. I don't argue. I explain why I'm correct. Yuna laughed. A real laugh, loud and unguarded. Nothing like the polite little sound she gave adults out of habit. Because in this house, ordinary afternoons weren't scheduled. They were celebrated. Denise offered Jaeswon coffee. He declined. She offered tea. He declined again. Otis leaned toward Denise and stage whispered, loud enough for the whole yard to hear, Don't worry. We'll fix him. Jaewon blinked. Excuse me? Otis smiled peacefully. Nobody survives this house without eventually taking the coffee. From the doorway, Mr. Beck pressed his lips together and studied the sky with sudden, intense interest. If you're enjoying this one, drop a like and let me know in the comments. It genuinely helps this story reach more people who'd love it too. The visits became routine without anyone officially deciding they would. Some afternoons, Yuna finished homework at the estate and then asked the same quiet question. Can we go to Malik's? Jaewon always pretended to think it over. He always said yes. One Saturday, Otis appeared in the yard with 3 water guns and set them on the grass with great ceremony. Championship rules, he announced. Malik grabbed his instantly. What are the rules? Simple. First one to surrender loses. Yuna eyed the guns. Why is yours bigger? Otis looked down at it, like he was noticing for the first time. Experience. That's not a rule. It is now. While Otis lectured the empty yard about bonus points for accuracy, which obviously favors the more seasoned competitor, Malik leaned toward Yuna and whispered, Same time. On 3, she whispered back. 1, 2. Otis turned around. Now, any questions before we... Water hit him from both sides at once. He staggered, slipped on the wet grass, grabbed the fence to keep from going down. Both kids reloaded before he could recover. Surrender! Malik shouted. Otis straightened with wounded dignity, hair plastered flat, apron soaked through. I do not surrender. Yuna looked at him, deadly serious. Grandpa Pop, your story's over. He wiped water from his eyes. That was chapter 1. Both kids groaned and soaked him again. Later, smoke drifted out from the kitchen window before anyone said a word. Otis sniffed once. Charcoal. Denise appeared at the door holding a spatula. It's not charcoal. It's rustic. Otis turned to the kids like he was presenting evidence in court. 15 years, every single Sunday. Rustic. Yuna looked at Malik. Malik shook his head slowly. Don't get involved. Denise pointed the spatula at Otis. You're welcome to cook then. His eyes lit up. He'd been waiting 15 years for exactly that sentence. He walked past her into the kitchen without another word, retying his apron like a man reclaiming a throne. Inside, Jaewon watched from the hallway, smiling before he realized Mr. Beck had appeared beside him. Sir. Jaewon didn't look away from the kitchen. What? You're smiling. I'm observing. You've been observing for 40 minutes. Jaewon finally glanced over. Mr. Bucklick looked back with total professional innocence. On the counter beside Jaewon sat a mug of Denise's coffee, which he had somehow accepted, and started drinking without noticing. Mr. Bake looked at the mug, then at his employer, and said absolutely nothing. That same afternoon, while the kids raced through the yard, Jaewon stood near the fence beside Otis. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Jaewon broke the silence. "How did you raise someone like Denise?" Otis watched his daughter laugh as Malik tripped over the garden hose. "I stopped trying to raise a perfect kid," he said. "I just made sure she always knew she was loved." The sentence didn't sound heavy when it landed, but it settled somewhere deep in Jaewon and refused to leave. He'd spent years giving Yuna everything money could buy: a flawless house, a flawless schedule, flawless safety. He'd solved every problem he could see. He had never once asked what his daughter actually felt. Weeks earlier, Yuna had counted the minutes until bedtime. Now she counted the days until the next visit. Mrs. Han noticed first. Yuna humming on the stairs, smiling at nothing, laughing quietly behind her bedroom door at some memory only she could see. The mansion was still quiet. It didn't feel empty anymore. Then, one ordinary evening, everything changed. Otis was in the garden telling a story, the kids were helping Denise stake the tomato plants, and nobody expected the afternoon to turn. The front gate slammed open. Two men walked in without knocking, without hesitating. One kicked over a flower pot on his way past. The other shoved the little wooden garden gate off its hinge. Otis stood immediately, voice level. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller one didn't even look at him. "We're here for the woman." Denise stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's me." The second man jerked his chin toward the street. "Walk away from this family. You don't belong here." Denise's eyes moved slowly between them. "I think you two should leave. We're not asking." Malik moved instinctively behind his mother. Yuna stepped closer to Otis, small hands curling into fists at her sides, watching, not moving. The taller man advanced on Denise. Otis stepped directly into his path. "That's far enough." The man looked at the old guy in the flour-dusted apron, standing between him and the porch, laughed once, and shoved him. Otis stumbled backward, his heel catching the garden path, and went down hard, the spatula skidding across the stones. For one frozen second, the whole yard held its breath. Then Yuna moved. She crossed the grass in a handful of steps and dropped to her knees beside him. "Grandpa Pop." Her voice didn't shake. "Can you sit up?" He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "Yeah." "Good girl." She slid both small hands under his arm and helped pull him up, refusing to let go until he was steady. Denise had already grabbed the rolling pin off the porch rail. She didn't say a word. Her eyes said plenty. The taller man came forward again. Otis was already back on his feet, apron filthy, shoulder aching, eyes completely calm. "You don't touch my daughter." The man lunged. Otis grabbed the nearest lawn chair and swung it once, catching him across the shoulder hard enough to send him sliding on the wet grass. He hit the ground. Before he could get up, Otis simply sat on him. "Now stay." He said it like he was commenting on the weather. "I've been gardening since 7 this morning. I'm a lot heavier than I look." Yuna stared at him from the porch, wide-eyed. "Grandpa Pop, did you just sit on him?" Otis considered the question seriously. "I prefer experienced negotiations." Even Denise nearly laughed. The second man looked around. Neighbors' porch lights flicking on. Someone already shouting that the police were on their way. His nerve broke. He ran. The gate banged shut behind him. The pinned man went still under Otis. "One job," Otis said pleasantly. "You picked Chapter 5 instead." Jaewon's sedan turned onto the street, before the sirens ever arrived. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, Mr. Beck half a step behind. Both of them braced for the worst. Instead, they found Otis sitting calmly on a stranger in the middle of the yard, apron ruined, hair full of leaves, completely unbothered. Mr. Beck stopped in his tracks. "Sir, I believe Grandpa Pop has already resolved the matter." Jaewon crossed the yard in 3 strides, eyes scanning fast. Denise, Malik, Otis, Yuna. His daughter met his eyes and nodded once. "I'm okay." Jaewon exhaled for what felt like the first time since his phone had rung. Then he really looked at her. She wasn't hiding behind anyone. She was standing beside Otis, steady on her own feet, and Jaewon looked at his daughter like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. The man barely lasted an hour under questioning. He wasn't dangerous, just scared and paid. His phone had everything investigators needed: messages, a recorded voice, wire transfers, all pointing to the same source. Soo-jin walked into the police station with her chin up, composed, expecting a misunderstanding she could talk her way out of. Instead, a phone was set on the table and a recording began to play. Her own voice, unmistakable. Don't hurt anyone, just scare them, especially the woman. Her composure cracked instantly. That recording could. The investigator laid the bank transfers beside it. She changed tack. I only wanted them to. The text messages came next. Every exit closed before she could reach it. She looked across the table at Jaewon, who hadn't said a single word since she walked in. He simply sat there and let the evidence finish the sentence he wouldn't. The investigator stood. Ma'am, you're under arrest. As the officers moved in, she looked at him one last time. She's replacing me. It wasn't really a question. He answered anyway. No, he said quietly. You gave that place up yourself. Soo-jin looked down. For the first time, the fear underneath everything else finally surfaced. She hadn't been afraid of Denise. She'd been afraid of what she saw in that garden. Her own daughter laughing, reaching for other people first, trusting a family she hadn't built. She hadn't lost custody years ago. She'd lost her daughter's trust, quietly, one missed promise at a time, until there was nothing left to lose. That evening, everyone gathered back at Denise's house. The broken pots had been swept aside, the damaged gate propped against the fence. Otis sat on the porch steps between the kids, one hand resting on each of their shoulders, checking on them every few minutes like a man making sure a door was still locked. Jaewon stood near the fence for a long time before Denise walked over. You didn't have to come back tonight. He looked at the broken gate, the disturbed garden, the two kids sitting quietly on the steps, then at Otis, pretending his shoulder wasn't throbbing. Yes, I did. She was quiet. Why? He looked at his daughter, tucked close beside Malik, not hiding, not scared, exactly where she felt safest. Because this is the first place my daughter's ever looked like she was home. The words settled softly into the evening air. Neither of them moved. The sentence didn't need a reply. It just needed to be heard. The next morning, workers arrived to reinforce the property. New gates, cameras, better lighting. Denise watched from the kitchen window. When Jaewon came inside, she handed him a coffee, without a word. He took it without thinking. I never asked for any of this, she said. I know, he answered, watching the crew work. I'm not protecting a house. I'm protecting the people inside it. Denise held the mug with both hands, looked down at it, and didn't answer. But something in her shoulders loosened, like a weight she'd been carrying alone had finally been set down. Weeks later, long after the house had gone quiet again, Jaewon sat alone in his study with an unsigned document waiting on the desk. He opened the security feed on his laptop instead. Otis was mid-story, which naturally reminds me of 1988, and three voices groaned in unison. Fine, 1989. Malik laughed. Denise was trying, and failing, to stop everyone from eating cookies before dinner. And then Jaewon heard it. His daughter's laugh, full and unguarded and free. He watched the screen without moving, one hand slowly coming up to cover his mouth, and said, almost too quiet to hear, I forgot what that sounded like. The office stayed completely still. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, a father sat alone with a screen full of laughter, and the quiet understanding that the most important thing his money had ever done for his daughter was bring her to a small house with tomato plants by the fence, burnt French toast on Sunday mornings, and an old man who never let a happy memory slip past unnoticed. That night, Otis called Yuna out to the porch steps and sat beside her without a word, both of them looking out at the yard. The tomato stakes, the mended gate, the patch of grass still flattened from the water gun championship. Then he reached into his apron pocket and placed a worn, dog-eared notebook into her hands. She looked down at it, then up at him. I can't take this. He smiled. Already filled it up. She opened the first page. Written across the top in big, careful handwriting. The day a little girl borrowed a mom. Her throat tightened. She turned the pages. Tiny memories scrawled in every line. Malik blamed her for the toast immediately. Old people can sprint, apparently. First real laugh, sports field. Second race, shared juice box. Water gun defeat, according to unreliable witnesses, and more. and more. I asked if he wanted a notebook of his own someday, Otis said. He hasn't shown me the first page yet. I think I already know what it says. Yuna stopped on that line and read it twice, eyes going glassy. She closed the notebook carefully and held it against her chest, then leaned into Otis's side without saying anything at all. He wrapped one arm around her. Neither of them spoke. The garden was quiet. The evening light was almost gone. Everything that mattered had already been written down. A little while later, Denise found Jaewon standing near the garden fence, watching Yuna through the window. Sitting at the kitchen table now, notebook open, carefully writing on a fresh page. Denise came to stand beside him. Neither spoke for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Thank you." He shook his head. "No. You gave her something I couldn't." She looked at him. "You let her keep coming here," she said softly. "A man who trusts almost no one. That wasn't a small thing." He met her eyes, and for a long moment neither of them moved. The kitchen light fell across her face, and he noticed things he'd been careful not to notice before. The way she talked about his daughter like she already belonged to her. The way she was still standing here, at the end of a hard day, still finding something kind to say. Something shifted in his chest, something he hadn't let himself feel in a very long time. He almost said it out loud. Then Otis's voice cracked through the back door. "Denise, if you're done abandoning your poor old father out here, I have an announcement." Denise looked away first, pressing her lips together to hide a smile. Jaewon exhaled slowly. In the corner of the yard, Mr. Beck suddenly found the sky fascinating. Inside, Malik cracked one eye open, then closed it again, grinning. Otis stood in the middle of the garden a minute later, arms crossed, expression deadly serious. "I've been thinking." Malik looked at Yuna. Yuna looked at Malik. Neither moved. Otis looked straight at Yuna. "You came here to borrow a mom." She nodded carefully. "And then you borrowed a brother." Malik grinned. "And a grandfather." Otis raised one finger. "I prefer Pop." "Grandpa Pop," Malik corrected instantly. Otis closed his eyes briefly, resigned. He looked back at Yuna. "So, are you done borrowing?" Yuna was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then Malik answered for her. "Can I keep my borrowed sister?" Yuna looked at him. "Only if I get to keep borrowing your family." Otis's voice came instantly, final. "No more borrowing." Everyone looked at him. He smiled, the kind of smile he'd clearly been saving up for this exact moment. "We're keeping everybody." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Jaewon quietly set a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Yuna looked up at her father, then at Malik, then at Denise, then back at Otis. This time, she let herself smile all the way. If this story warmed your heart, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. There are so many more stories like this one coming, and you won't want to miss them.